Hello and welcome back to Parley, my on-the-spot responses to the prompts you folks submit. This one is from PistilWhip, hope you'll enjoy listening. It's a feast fit for a pirate king, such as I humbly accept that title. Your words, not mine. This is a parley about the eating of metaphors. The parley begins, something meaty for the main course. That's a fine-looking high horse. PistilWhip begins, ahoy captain. The preceding lines come from the second verse of Hosier's Take Me to Church, which many of you are probably familiar with. In an interview, the artist explains the line takes that supposed moral high horse, the idea of it being on a high horse, and imagines with this idea of butchering it and using it to feed people. Something meaty for the main course, that's a fine looking high horse. You get it? That's what we're doing in this parley, okay? I could perhaps go for another lyrical interpretation parley, PistilWhip continues, but on account of the Thanksgiving season when this was originally submitted, I will instead ask, what do you suppose high horse tastes like? Perhaps it is full of bitter hypocrisy, or has a bright note of naivete. Is it gamey, like a wild animal, or has its flavor mellowed through many, many years of domestication? And certainly we must account for doneness. However, I must reinforce that the high horse is merely the main course. We must, perforce, have discourse on what other dishes we might source divorced from remorse. The decisions, of course, are yours, for better or worse. I just want to remind everyone that I don't write the parley. However, I think worse is a hilarious slant rhyme. Could I interest you in a potage of cold turkey and spilled milk? If the bird in hand is unpalatable, might you prefer the two in the bush? We can serve the chicken before the egg. For the entree, how about boneless ribs from the elephant in the room, or a fish out of water? Specifically, the carp over there, with shimmering scales covering supple flesh. If you fancy a sandwich, which I do, we can put bread on the table and bring home the bacon. And for just desserts, a slice of the hill someone died on, or a compote made from the apples of someone's eyes. You can, of course, have your cake and eat it too, served the way the cookie crumbles, along with whipped cream of the crop and a cherry on top. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the coming feast. Do let us know if you have any substitutions you'd like to make. Well, actually, I have a pretty severe nut allergy to peanuts and most tree nuts, and so actually if you could just sort of redo all of this and bend over backwards to accommodate my needs, instead of me ordering things where that's just not as necessary, that would actually be really good. Thank you so much for redoing your whole restaurant for my needs. No, it's usually not necessary. Nut allergies. You're pretty lucky overall, I would say. It's usually extremely easy. And yeah, you can hear my opinion on it. I think you need to be a little bit gracious and be willing to adapt a little bit if you're going to go to a restaurant. You can't just say, I'm ordering the chicken, and then it comes out. And I once heard this person saying like, oh, like it's not cooked. And you could see very clearly, well, I mean, it is. You're just saying you don't prefer that way it's cooked. It's not a flaw for it to be, it's valid to cook chicken that way. You're just saying you don't prefer it that way. That's okay, but there isn't the same onus on them to make it right, in my humble opinion, even though we know most restaurants will. Blah, blah, blah. I think people are slightly, about restaurant food. So I can try to lead by example. That's what I think. So let's see what we can expect. It's reasonable to do some detective work or ask the server some questions so you know that you're going to get what you'd like. I suppose we have a lot of substitutions that I might like to make, and now I'm going to ask this, I'm sure very stressed out server who just very well delivered this delicious multi-course meal for a ridiculous amount of clarifications. What is any of that? Here we go. And that's what this parley will be. I figure we will, it's kind of a hard one to decide what exactly to do. And so the course of action I'm taking is we're going to go through all that I was able to detect of the like idioms or sayings or whatever you want to call them in this very amusingly written parley. I will give a very brief summary / opinion about them. Then I wanted to make a comment on how you organized it, because I think it's really interesting how ideas that are kind of related have sayings that are kind of related. And so because you laid out everything in the order of the food physically as an item in a multi-course meal, you wouldn't necessarily think similar ideas would group together, but they did, which might be because you thought of them more. But anyway, I just think that's really interesting. So we're going to do that. And then, yeah, we will obviously comment on what you would think the flavor of everything will be, having added that context, and what flavor here can mean. I personally think that if you've left it as moderately open-ended as you have, I also want to discuss the nourishment of the soul. How are these philosophies to nourish the life of the person that consumes them, not just the physical food? Of course, we treat it as both, right? Some foods might have a philosophically valuable quality, but be bad for you, like mac and cheese. I think we can all agree is one of the more philosophically valuable foods. It's a comfort food, is what I'm saying, but it's, not healthy. So obviously we need to talk about that for all of these, which there's a lot. So that's it. No more preamble. Let's go, because we have very limited time. I can see already I missed one, so I'm going to add back in between hill that someone died on and bring home the bacon. There is just desserts, which I wish I had noticed before, because that's actually one of the somewhat harder ones to define, in my opinion. Okay, great. Starting from the top. Let's start with the hosier line, actually, as a way to pitch this. Something meaty for the main course. That's a fine-looking high horse. Being on a high horse is the first one. Fairly straightforward. It means you're taking a moral high ground. I think the implications or problems with this one are sometimes a little overlooked, but I think that they are. Usually that the position the person on the high horse is taking, they're being insufferable about it. Saying this is better sometimes. But I think the crux of the problem is mostly that the high horse position is usually not practical, or it's a philosophically comfortable position or a pedantically correct position, but which doesn't actually apply or cause the person to take action. A really commonly criticized type of position is where people say something they argue is a good idea, but which just so happens to cause them to need to do nothing, and that's better. I do think people can be a little dismissive when the idea of a high horse comes up, though, which I can't resist saying in these parlay, for my job is essentially, this is just devil's advocate, the podcast. So, sorry, not sorry. A lot of the time, if people take a position and calmly explain a good reason why the position would be the case, other people often completely discard the argument if it is advantageous to the person making the argument, which I do think is going a little far. Usually if people are making a bad argument, it's pretty easy to just listen to what they said, see if they're actually making a good case for the thing they want to do, and then critique it based on that, while politely ignoring whether it benefits them or not. When people are making arguments in bad faith, and they say, oh, I think this is a good way to do things, which just so happens to mean I don't need to do anything, I believe in times when you break that down and the person is being disingenuous, it's already obvious they have a bad argument. You don't need to make it an ad hominem attack and say, oh, you're only saying that because it's to your advantage to argue that. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's to their advantage. I agree, but you are actually going too far in that case and saying, if it's to your advantage, your potentially good argument is disqualified? No. Why? No. But sure, it is very often done disingenuously. Absolutely. Devil's Advocate, the podcast. Quitting something cold turkey. This is the idea that you very abruptly stop doing something, right? Rather than tapering off or doing less and less every day, you just abruptly stop. It is usually used in the context of that being harder than doing it some other way. You have a vice or something like that, and you could, or people do, kind of wean off of it, but you try to quit cold turkey. But I think it's important to remember that it's also very common that quitting cold turkey is a bad idea, or not very sustainable. Actually, some of these other phrases have some things to say about that. It's not very steady progress. I think most people have this idea that most people fetishize willpower. And so to them, if something is harder to will yourself to do, it's then better somehow to do. But like it's not, though, and what really matters is if it works. And quitting cold turkey usually doesn't work for humans. We are creatures of habit. Usually it is not a good idea to try to quit cold turkey. It's not sustainable. I also believe that when people quit cold turkey, it is often an attempt to avoid the underlying problem, to try to kind of erase it or cover it up by saying, oh, everything will be fine if I just like stop everything right now. Whereas when you gradually drop off of something, you often need to communicate with other people or get other help, which people often don't want to do. And so I feel like a lot of the time you could actually go back to high horse and say, well, it sounds noble, but like it's not actually going to work, and it's just more comfortable for you than if you tried to commit whatever way. If you've ever quit a vice cold turkey, you may think it's ridiculous for me to say it's more comfortable, because physically, I'm sure it isn't in most cases. But what I mean is that physiologically or psychologically, I think it's worth acknowledging that there is something comforting about the idea of saying, oh, I just won't ever do it ever again, starting right now. And that is sort of easier in a way that may be a problem than weaning off of it gradually. Not crying over spilt milk. The damage is done, no point worrying about it. Not a whole lot to say about this one. The idea is sort of sunk cost of emotions. You care about something, it's okay to care about things. When you care about things, sometimes you're disappointed. That's what caring about things is. Passionate people are inherently a little courageous because it means that they're invested in the things that they like, and they are vulnerable to being blown out and having that care for them be turned into regret. But it's important to use the thought tool of, what's done is done. It's pretty straightforward. Bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. These are going decently quickly. Maybe we'll actually finish. There's a lot. Bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. The idea is that a steady but more modest profit is better than a risky but potentially larger gain. Pretty debatable one. I don't know that I think that is true that often. I feel like it depends a lot on the circumstance. There's a lot of times, for example, where I find that when something is risky, people tend to use logic less to evaluate its pros and cons, but why? It is very effective to evaluate something's pros and cons that way. A really common experience I have is when I've played, common as much as I played these games, which is not that much. When you play something where you have a chance at random loot or a gacha game or something like that, I personally think it is very psychologically profitable to roll a very small amount, like one time, on basically anything you have an even passing interest in. Because in aggregate, over the course of a life where you do that, you will end up occasionally getting ambushed by something you do kind of want, while spending virtually no resources to get it. And having done this for years in some games that I play, I can tell you it has added to my experience a lot. So I do personally feel like the 2 in the bush is a little bit underrated, or like people just don't give it an equal seat at the table. It's an evaluatable risk just like everything else. That being said, the general sentiment of a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush is, in sustainable progress, the word sustainable is like equally important. It's not about progress, it's about sustainable progress. Sure. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? This one is a little bit of an odd one out. It doesn't say a lot on its own. It's more of a sort of type of philosophical quandary that sort of means, the way I think of it is like nature versus nurture, but it comes up a lot of ways where usually it isn't completely true to say one or the other, and there's a sort of nature of coming into existence, circular logic, like conundrum thing happening, and we just have to think about like the causality of things is what this calls to mind. A slightly an odd one out. I feel like this is a less well-defined one, to me at least. I always think of nature versus nurture, which of course, like, it's obviously both. There's really no content to that question. But it's a perfectly fine saying. I'm just saying the nature versus nurture thing. The elephant in the room. This is an obvious issue that people present at a discussion or gathering are ignoring or purposefully avoiding. Usually not because it's like confusing as much as that they just like don't want to, basically. It would be an uncomfortable truth that they don't want to accept. Not because they have no idea how to respond, but I think much of the time because they feel like they know what it's going to be like if the top topic comes up, and they, easy for me to say, don't want that to come up, because they know what they think they can expect, and they don't like that. A fish out of water. This is being in an unfamiliar or not an environment you're not used to, not necessarily you being ineffective or not in that environment, just that you're a fish out of water, you're in a new place, and you're doing well or poorly, but it is like uncomfortable, is the way I think of it at least. It doesn't necessarily need to mean you're floundering, though a fish out of water probably would be. I would imagine this one in aggregate probably does have a slight negative connotation. Something that's really interesting about English in general and talking about these phrases is that because English has a ton of words and sounds, and that might sound weird, but other languages don't always have the same size of syllabary, that's the sounds in the language, but then also like just words, like languages have different numbers of words and different numbers of like close synonyms. That's not the same in every language. I think it's reasonable to argue that English has a lot of these. German is also famous for having these like very particular words for very specific concepts. You'll see collections of like 50 German words we don't have things for in English or whatever. Like, okay, cool. Those two. I think it's fair to say this is a feature of English as well. It is a noteworthy language for having like similar but different meanings for things. And so one of the interesting consequences of that is that a lot of the time things basically do mean the exact same thing, and it's just that how they're used in context is usually around a more positive or negative or whatever thing. The content of the definition of the word is exactly the same as another word, except for around what other words it is used, which is sort of weird if you think about it. If I say that, it's like on the one hand, you know that. That's just how language works, sort of. But on the other hand, isn't that bizarre? Like the word kind of doesn't mean anything except in relation to this other word that kind of means the same thing, but is used in different context. And the only real meaning of some words is it's that, but it's a completely different word on the surface, but it means the same as that. It's just used at different times. Like, that's odd. I don't know. Anyway, and probably not true in every language. With some modest knowledge of a few other languages, there are like tones and levels of formality in a lot of languages. But I feel like some languages don't have this to the same degree. Anyway, I just think it's weird and cool. Okay, the last one was a fish out of water, and now we have sort of a curveball one. I'm gonna read it again, actually. So we had, for the entree, how about boneless ribs from the elephant in the room, or a fish out of water? Specifically, the carp over there, with shimmering scales covering supple flesh. If you cocked your head at this one, I actually initially did too, before about half a second later remembering that this is that one parlay we did. You pitched this very bizarre song, and then basically the same lyrics, but with a very different tone. And, you know, I'll find that parlay and put it in the description. The, like, carp over there parlay. Because I thought that one was very fun and quite a journey, actually. Now, I've decided not to go back to that one to answer this. I'm just going to say what I think of it as a saying off the top of my head, just because this is not, as far as I'm aware, a mainstream, like, saying or ism. Doesn't really matter. I mean, PistilWhip and I have thought of it as one before. Who cares, you know? And I would say that the another carp over there could mean a few different things. I know I didn't say exactly this in that parlay, so it will be interesting to eventually compare. But carp often have the connotation of being like an annoyance or a nuisance or like an omnipresent but not especially desirable thing. In the song that we did in that parlay, the look, there's another carp over there was a sort of a perpetual distraction or inevitability, more monotony. Is sort of part of how I think of it, that yes, they're seeing all these interesting fish and spotting fish and fishing, but also that there's constantly invading another carp over there, and that there's a sort of omnipresence or like inevitability to something about the presence of this like whatever mediocre fish. Carp have a lot of weird cultural contexts, though. They're an important fish. It's weird to say. For example, I happen to know there's this thing in European cultures where you'll get like a saltwater carp and put it in a bathtub and in fresh water and let it sort of desalt for a few days. That sounds kind of gross to me, but I don't know. It's outside my cultural context. I don't know. No offense. I'm just saying that Is that right? That sounds not that sanitary. But okay, maybe it's completely fine. And maybe it's better, you know. Maybe that makes the carp like cleaner to eat. I guess what you're trying to do is to remove the salt with osmosis, right? And then eat it. And then this is like a Christmas tradition, as I understand. I don't know. Like, help. I'm not sure. The carp thing. We're moving on. Breadwinner, or putting bread on the table. This is like the provider, or the act of providing, in certain household organizations. You might be able to tell from my way of wording this that I'm not a fan of this perception. I feel like the idea that relationships or families are like an exchange, and even the structure of modern families in general, like, I just don't approve. I feel like that's not a good way for people to organize and grow up, and you could make almost anything would be better. And so if you have an odd upbringing, I feel like the odds that that benefited you are high, in my opinion, unless it's like, if you have divorced parents, that could be very challenging. A lot of my friends had that growing up. And I can see how that could be challenging. But if it's like almost anything else, or I think of people that went to like an irregular education, the current education system is so bad that if you went to anything other than the straightforward education system, anything that wasn't the normal thing, it was probably better. I mean, it would have been very difficult to make it worse. So and that's sort of how I feel about most family organizations. That being said, it is, though, in my opinion, an economical division of labor to have one person be doing the thing that makes money more directly, as long as the couple or family can organize that in a way that's useful. For example, the setup of like someone maintaining the house and like cooking and doing logistical stuff. I feel like in a traditional family unit, often there isn't enough to do that it is comparable to like working a full-time job, but it could maybe be, or you could help with the full-time job. That's interesting. Not a situation I can personally attest to, but that doesn't sound like a bad idea in theory. So I don't want to act like this is so bad, just to say the nuclear family or whatever you want to call it. I do think is bad, but this is maybe like one of the only good parts in theory, just not in practice. Bringing home the bacon, similar, and we'll get to that later. But the idea here is that it's more positive. Yes, you could say you're putting bread on the table, you know, you're the breadwinner for the family. Bringing home the bacon could have a similar context, but I think of this like you made a big business deal. The difference is that the breadwinner thing is you persist, you sustain the family or whatever, whereas the bringing home the bacon is like you win big or you profit, I guess, is the way I think of that difference. Okay, the one I missed, just desserts. Getting your just desserts. The way I think of this as it's kind of a karma thing. You get what was coming to you, or it's related to that thing that's like you sleep in the bed that you sleep in the bed you paid for yourself, or you dug that hole and now you have to lay in it. That probably isn't the right saying, but whatever, you get it. This is getting very difficult to manage. The point here is about you getting what you would expect, what it would be reasonable for you to get out. And I think often there's a sort of karma, or not irony, but like appropriateness to the outcome of the thing that happens to the other individual. Why it's desserts, like the etymology of this one, I don't really know. We haven't really talked about that for many of these, because many of these it's like fairly obvious what the context is, like where it came from. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, there's not a lot of etymology to explain. But why is it just desserts? Or like, why is quitting cold turkey? Like, I don't know. I thought it would be more interesting to do this parlay without looking these up for the most part, except where I was having a brain fart and then I just like looked it up on a search engine very quickly, looked at a few people talking about it on, Quora or whatever to jog my memory, and then went, oh, okay, right, it's that thing, got it. And then I thought it would be more fun if I just said what I think. Dying on the hill of a concept, like stubborn commitment. I think of it as to like a pet idea a lot of the time, an idea that so it's committing to an idea beyond what's reasonable, but usually because you have a non-logical additional attachment to the idea is what I think, I guess. You like this idea for a reason beyond the reasoning that you would normally use to defend this idea, which is why you seem to defend it to the point that it's getting a little ridiculous. You die on the hill of that idea. I think the cause is what I'm saying, is usually that you have some like different from normal motivation for wanting that thing or wanting to defend that thing. The apple of your eye. I don't know, to me, this has a somewhat romantic context, but this is one where I had a brief brain fart. And when I looked it up, the few things I saw were like just somebody that you have a very strong positive bias for and that you cherish deeply. I think of it as having a romantic or like infatuated context, but I didn't see that. So I don't know. This was one where initially I had a bit of a brain fart, but no, I have a pretty pronounced idea about this. So I don't know. Maybe that's not how other people think of it. Having your cake and eating it too. It's kind of a weird one. People say this a lot, and I feel like it's not broken down that often. I say this one a lot, and so I have quite an opinion about this one. Basically, the idea here is that you have your cake, you possess the cake, and then you eat it too. These are mutually exclusive. You can't have both. What's strange about this one then is that usually this is used as a way to evoke the idea that though normally it isn't possible, the person bringing it up has found a way to get both benefits, even though normally they would be mutually exclusive. You or other people think of them as being mutually exclusive, but you think that you can get both this way. If you've watched anything from me for a meaningful amount of time, you're probably starting to go, right, okay, yes, this is a Zandy thing. I'm virtually constantly arguing that people are generally, I believe, people are way too quick to believe this is the case and don't try hard enough to have both. When people aren't greedy enough is the way I would think of it as. Greed being, of course, the optimal sin, the one sin that isn't bad. If you intelligently apply every sin, they're all pretty much bad except for greed, is the idea. Wrath is not like good when you're smart. It pretty much is better to just never be wrathful. Sloth isn't really good if you're smart. You can say the thing where like you work smarter, not harder, but that's not sloth, like as far as I'm concerned. Greed, where you genuinely get more instead of just short-sightedly getting more, is good. Like it is good to increase the size of the pie. And I think this is a good evocation of that idea. Our society seems to think there's something noble about having to compromise a bit. And there is, because compromising is a necessary last resort. A last resort. But I feel people are often a little bit too quick to go, it's like this versus that, I'll just pick one. When in no way has it been proven that you can't just get both. And a lot of the time you definitely can. It's just not that common that you see both. That's the way the cookie crumbles. This another weird one. It's like an acknowledgement that something kind of inevitable or kind of expected, like perhaps not unexpected, has indeed gone badly. This one is a lot of contexts. It's a negative but not too negative thing in my mind. It's like something bad, but it's not a huge deal, like casually bad happens. That was sort of expected, and maybe you tried to avoid it, but it's not like the end of the world, and there it is, you know. A little bit, I think of this one as being like the reverse of some of the, you know, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Like maybe you just did a risk like that, and so you kind of expected, oh, maybe it wasn't going to work out perfectly, but that's sort of par for the course is a related thing, in my opinion. Par for the course is often used negatively to be like, well, okay, but that's like only as good as, you know, you would just expect anyway. This is to me almost like the negative version of that. That is bad, but it being bad in that way is kind of like what we expected, is how I would think of it. Almost done. Cream of the crop. The highest ranked of a group in terms of raw quality. I think there's almost the least possible to say about this one. And the cherry on top. About something that is already great, the cherry on top is like a bonus good thing that is also part of the experience. I personally feel like the cherry on top is not only a bonus good thing, but it usually contains the context that the thing that the cherry is on top of, metaphorically, is already very good. That is like something bad or mediocre isn't then you have a cherry on top. The cherry on top is the thing is already excellent, already well above average. plus something else also good. So very triple good. Great. There they are. A pretty wide mix. And I probably missed one or two. I missed that just desserts one until I read the parlay through the second time. So clearly I missed some of them, I'm sure. And it'll be fun to see which ones. I think this is the funner, more fun way to do this kind of parlay. You've done one like this before, and this is similar to the tactic I did with that one. So I'm also hedging my guesses that if you ask the parlay like this again, that means you liked that approach. So that's part of why I'm doing it this way. We will now, of course, go back through them, having talked through what they like are, and talk about the flavor, the crux of the other thing you're asking here. You seem to want me to break them down, but also like, yeah, which ones do you want to eat? Which will be much faster now that we've done this. I think that was worth separating. Otherwise, it would be hard to keep each one in mind. Now we can just kind of go back and reference them. I do want to briefly talk about that thing I said before about the nourishment of the soul, if you will, how these are as philosophically nourishing concepts. And before that, I did want to quickly point out that something kind of interesting happened with the way you grouped them. So I was hinting at this before, reading the bread on the table and bring home the bacon. If you fancy a sandwich, we can put bread on the table and bring home the bacon. Putting bread on the table, very homey. Bring home the bacon. They're both like, you envision someone coming home from work and they've made the money to exist in the society in some connotation. They're both like that. Isn't it interesting how the framing is similar? Maybe it's not that weird. People would come up with somewhat similar phrases. And as I said earlier, I think it's reasonable to assume that you PistilWhip writing these, it might be that you just, of course, thought of a similar idiom or whatever, like around the time you were writing about the other one. That's not unexpected. But it's interesting how much of the time they go together pretty well. So for example, this is sort of weird, but like just desserts and then the slice of the hill someone died on. The dying on the hill and then just desserts. Again, both these like negative images, and it just happens that they fit together. If you keep going, a lot of philosophically related concepts, like for one reason or another, happened to come up near each other. And I think that's interesting. This is not enough data. This isn't even arguably data to say this, but wouldn't it be interesting if in aggregate, similar foods were associated with similar philosophical concepts? They probably kind of are. But like the chicken and the egg, the one bird in the hand is worth two in the bush thing, those are next to each other. Again, perhaps you thought of those because they're similar, but they also are kind of similar. I don't know. Maybe there's nothing there. I just thought it was a cool effect that you can see a little. So I thought I would point it out. But the main reason to point it out is the idea that there is a philosophical progression to the courses in the meal. And that it would be interesting to briefly endeavor to think about what the philosophical, nourishment of these ideas can be. What do I mean by this? Basically, I'm saying if the flavor is how much do I want to eat milk that was spilled on the floor, drink milk off of the floor, which is that I don't. Not crying over spilt milk is very good advice, though. And so I feel like it's worth taking a look at that. I think that's more interesting. Let's imagine, even further, that to get the philosophical benefit, you must eat the food like it is a nutrient in each of the things you need to eat. That's wacky. Let's do that. I'm very glad that real life doesn't work that way. So in honor of that not being a real thing, let's have that be the rest of the parlay, shall we? Good talk. So high horse. Horse meat is something people eat decently often. Meat eat decently. It was fun. Maybe you got me doing it too. But remember, you also wrote yorse and worse as two slant rhymes. So I'm not, I think I may have the high horse here is what I'm trying to boo. You may leave the parlay now. It's okay. I will actually survive that. I will be booed off the stage now, but being on a high horse is bad. So horse meat, yeah, it's like okay. You know, medium to this is all right. Compared to what's coming, I feel like grading on a curve, we should probably rate horse about average as something to physically eat. Now, what you want me to guess is what manner of texture and flavor the meat may have, and high horse. So let's read your examples. Perhaps it is full of bitter hypocrisy, or has a bright note of naivete. Is it gamey like a wild animal? Or has its flavor mellowed through many, many years of domestication? And certainly we must account for doneness. Sure. I think the naivete thing is interesting. So I think what you're suggesting is they're on a high horse because their idea hasn't been taken to task yet. This is a very charitable view of people on a high horse that I somewhat agree with. The idea that if somebody has a sort of moral high ground opinion, it might not be that they deliberately, maliciously want to gain social capital by holding a seemingly good position while actually doing nothing. It may be that they just don't know how impractical their opinion actually is. They just don't know that. And so to them, they don't believe they are on a high horse, basically. And of course, there's nothing more insufferable than someone who doesn't know about the philosophical ramifications of the thing that they've thought of, or who ignores the existence of them, doesn't try to figure them out. So I can get behind that somewhat. I think that's a reasonable claim, a very realist of view, not overly cynical or optimistic. And so, yeah, I would say the bright note of naivete, I could see the horse being, this is a lively cut of high horse, if that's what's happening here. However, doneness, raw, boy. I don't think there's a bit of cook on that meat. This is that horse sashimi, is what I'm trying to say. And I do not want to eat that, especially if the nutriment of eating that is to be on a high horse. Boo! Next food. My substitution for that one is to please skip that part. I don't want to eat that. Quitting cold turkey. There's some room for interpretation here with my weird magical you are what you eat philosophically thing that if that's what we're doing, which is that if you eat the cold turkey, do you now gain the ability to easily quit things cold turkey? That would be valuable. I was just saying earlier that I think humans are, without further modification, very bad at that. I don't think it is bad. I just think it's bad how people fetishize that idea when human beings at base are so bad at doing that. It would be better to, it wouldn't be fetishizing anymore, to fetishize or hold up that it's good to make sustainable change, gradual sustainable change. But only because humans aren't good at it. It's not like inherently bad to change quickly. That's good. That sounds great. So if you can eat cold turkey, which, like, I just had some cold turkey in a turkey and cheese sandwich this morning. It was excellent. It was applewood smoked cold turkey, cold cut turkey. And I get the ability to change on a dime. S tier level food, no notes. Give me all of that. How does it taste then? The cold turkey. Yeah, this is like you wake up in the morning and you slept in a little too late, and you go into the fridge and you're sort of in goblin mode, even though it's like 11 a.m. or whatever. And you go into the fridge and you get your cold cuts and your bread. And I always toast the bread, which I know is a little weird because the sandwich is going to be otherwise cold, but I think the texture benefit is there. I assemble the sandwich, and I assemble the sandwich like a weirdo, where I put the cheese and then a piece of turkey and then a piece of cheese and a piece of turkey on the plate, put away everything. And then when the bread is done, I just put the whole like set of fillings into the sandwich, and that gets it done slightly faster since I'm taking it as a given that I'm going to toast the bread. I made 24 hours of video about sandwiches, so I just get to derail the parlay and say this actually. The parlay bylaws suggest that this is completely fair play. And so if it's that cold turkey, that slaps. You know, it's a little melancholy. You sort of feel like you're waking up and it's groggy. There's some hangover energy, yeah, to this type of experience. But I don't think that's bad. I just feel like it's, you know, it's not unflavorful or dry turkey necessarily, but it is cold. It's not a warm cooked meal. It is a taste of reality. if you will. Just like the turkey industry, prospering during Thanksgiving, needs to find a way to sell turkey meat from their turkey farm for the rest of the year. And turkey as a cold cut, not known for being particularly delicious, though it is unusually healthy compared to some other meat. And it can be very good, like roasted or smoked. You can make turkey taste good. That's just not what people do at Thanksgiving most of the time. Oh, I don't know your life. Maybe your turkey's delicious. Statistically, it isn't, though. Anyway, so that, okay, but big deal. You have to eat that turkey. It's cold leftover Thanksgiving dinner turkey, which I don't like. You have to eat that turkey, but then you gain the ability to change in a dime. Obviously worth it. Again, like double S tier. Fantastic. Probably will not be beat for the rest of these. I guess let's see. Yeah, I don't know if I can speed up, but there's like not enough time to do all these. We're totally doing it though. Not crying over spilt milk. Yeah, I mean, it's fine to accept reality, but I don't want to drink milk off the floor. Now, this is that cold spilt milk, you know? I think of not crying over spilt milk as being, it's fresh. The loss, I guess, is fresh. And so the milk is cold, not spoiled, good quality milk. I am actually of the opinion that this makes it slightly worse because you might have wanted to drink it. I made a latte a few days ago and dropped it on the floor, and the glass broke and the latte broke and was suffused into the floorboards, and I was sad. And it's sort of worse because it was gonna taste good. It wasn't just some whatever milk, you know? But that's why the advice is good. So drink the floor latte. You can move on from things more easily. This is kind of gross, but I'm gonna say, yeah, keep that one in. Next item. But not that good of a rating. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. So what are we eating here? I'm eating pheasant, basically, is what's happening. But I eat one pheasant and I lose two hypothetical pheasants that I could have eaten. Is that what we're just Schrodinger's dinner course that's happening? And if you eat the one pheasant, then you hedge your bets on investments. Your Robinhood account becomes more stable. Can I pick to eat the one pheasant, or then pick to Schrodinger's superposition, eat two pheasants or eat no pheasant? Can I pick that instead and then get riskier investments, but that are statistically an equally statistically probable amount of the time profitable? You remember I was arguing when we brought this up earlier that it's actually somewhat underrated to take the riskier investment sometimes. It depends on context, and people tend to slightly underrate those types of approaches. Again, it's seen as culturally noble to do something reliable, but that doesn't, logic doesn't care. Sometimes it's very profitable to do something risky, or the loss is not very high. I'm already eating a multi-course meal, maybe eating two pheasants, which I probably won't finish, sorry, versus maybe eating none. I've got plenty of food. I don't know about this one. Can I pick the superposition pheasants? Pass. Next question. Which came first, chicken or the egg? What I thought of, because of course I did, is oyakodon. Oyakodon is a Japanese, I would say, comfort food that literally means something like parent and child bowl. Oyako is parent and child, and then don is a style or presentation of Japanese meal that is a rice bowl, basically. But there's further philosophy we won't get into here. What I thought of was oyakodon. So if you can eat an oyakodon, chicken rice bowl, I know that's a little brutal, parent and child bowl, but anyway, whatever, chicken and rice is good together over rice. And then what does this one do if you philosophically eat it? You think more about the nature of causality. I feel like I already think about that. I can't really imagine what thinking about that more would be like for me as an individual. So maybe that's not good. I think I want this one though. I don't know. It sounds good. And then the taste of the chicken and the egg. Here's my gimmick here, is that the taste of one of them is going to be not that fresh, and the other one is going to taste really fresh, but you just don't know which going into it, as a way to sort of mimic the idea that this idea suggests that one of them is first, even though in reality that's basically never the case. If it's not stale, you know, like the chicken or egg hasn't like gone bad. Sounds kind of fine, right? I think this one is okay, but the benefit is just like, what does this do? Like, what do I benefit from by eating this? I'm eating it. You said it's an oyakodon. Big deal. It's a mediocre oyakodon. That's basically delicious, you know. Like, great, sign me up. The elephant in the room, elephant ribs specifically, boneless ribs from the elephant in the room. Sounds like a lot of food. I don't know about eating elephant as a meat or food stuff. It seems kind of ridiculously unsustainable, but a lot of meat is. So I guess maybe that's not a huge problem. I feel like that's not ideal though. The elephant in the room. But then people dance around. But is the elephant in the room that you don't dance around the elephant in the room, or is the eating the elephant in the room ribs is you do dance around the elephant in the room? Yeah, I take it as quite a point of pride to not do this. Usually when there's an elephant in the room, I go to a family gathering. I'm fun at a family gathering because the kind of person I am at a family gathering is that thing we're all thinking, I say out loud as quickly as possible. Like, basically, there was a wedding and it was too expensive for us to go, and now we all feel guilty. We really shouldn't feel guilty. I think it would have been reasonable for them to have thought about whether that was accessible for all of us to go to. And no one has to feel like bad about that, really, but we definitely shouldn't feel bad for being like too poor to go. That's weird. No. And I'm the type of person who would go, yeah, screw that. No, actually, like, we don't need to feel bad just because we would have liked to have gone. Like, it is a two-way street. I want to support you. I want you to not pick a place that is $5,000 to go to, you know? So yeah. Therefore, I'm not sure. Like, I don't want to lose that quality. I bet everybody else wants me to lose it, but I don't care. I want that quality. And I don't want to eat. I like boneless ribs a lot, though. What kind of boneless ribs are they, though? It's like a late arriving flavor. The barbecue sauce, which I assume there is right there, like good ribs. You put this sauce on them. You put them in the oven. You basted them. They're smoked or something. They're tasty ribs, but this is like a late arriving flavor. This is, you eat them and the flavor is somewhat dodgy. There's this thing in high cuisine, I'm not sure what that is, but fancy food, where there's this idea that when you make something for a contest of professional tasters, it's the first bite that's trying to be impactful. But when you make something for like the masses, it's often the third bite that is the one that is more savory or tasty. The flavor builds up in the mouth. This is something people are eating to nourish themselves. And so those foods are often kind of balanced differently than foods designed for a competition. You could imagine this. A very simple example I really like is the AeroPress, the coffee maker, the AeroPress, has competitions, because of course it does, where the recipe they use is very interesting. Most of the competitors use a very specific style of recipe, where the short version is they brew the AeroPress coffee very short. They don't really finish brewing it before plunging. And the idea is that this hyper focuses on the bright flavors at the front of coffee's flavor profile, but it creates a very thin coffee in terms of like texture and body. Something that I think most people who drink coffee regularly do not want, but the flavor you're adding by steeping it longer is indeed like less particular or noteworthy, just good. Does that make sense? And so there's this idea that by comparison, if you eat food at a diner, yes, it might have less like shocking impact, but you may find it more satisfying over the course of a meal. And is that not perhaps the more important quality? And so I mean, the thing about the elephant is, like, you got to the topic eventually. I'm gonna say this one gets a pass. Sounds all right. I'll still have some. Fish out of water, being in a new environment which is not comfortable or familiar. It's a fish out of water. This is what I think. It's in something else. It's in like a sauce. It's swimming in a sauce, and you are to get it fresh caught and have some, let's do sashimi again. But it was swimming literally in ponzu sauce. Sounds kind of immoral to the fish, but I don't know. We're in abstraction land, so I guess it's fine. And then you have to be a fish out of water, or you get to be good at being a fish out of water, philosophically. I didn't think the what do you get from eating the food through thing like as much as I could have. But go figure. Yeah, I think this one makes you be a fish out of water, but you get this experience. A marinated piece of sashimi sounds good. I like that, sounds basically delicious. But then the thing you get isn't as good. Going back to cold turkey, I think this falls short of that, but the food sounds maybe better. It's just the benefit is significantly inferior, but still fine. It's kind of interesting to a reasonably comfortable, capable person, which I believe myself to be a fish out of water now and again. So even though that's kind of not positive, I actually sort of want that. So, okay, cool, great. Another carp over there from that one song. Yeah, so what are we doing here? This is the European thing where you put the saltwater carp in the freshwater bathtub and desalt it, and then I'm eating that. And if I eat that, then there's something about the monotony and inevitability of human existence and shimmering scales covering supple flesh that is impacted upon me, and I have to eat a desalted carp. Sounds fine. I feel like it doesn't sound that good. I don't know. Fish is really interesting. Different kinds of fish are so different. I'm kind of meh on this one. I don't feel like the thing you get is, I feel like the thing you get is one of the worst things. Like, it's like novelty will eventually wear off is sort of the content of this one, in my opinion. That I don't want that by a lot. Putting that one at the bottom, that sounds very bad. And the carp sounds like whatever, it's a fish. Have you seen how much food I've eaten so far in this meal? Breadwinner versus putting bread on the table. So you eat a piece of bread on a table, okay? And you have the most normal, I'm going to use this one as a benchmark. Also, we're sort of running out of time. This is the most basic. You eat a piece of bread on a table, and the feeling you get is you have the most statistically average life in nuclear America in the 1900s. Next one. Bring home the bacon. Now we're talking, baby. I love that chocolate covered bacon. I've got my uncle in Utah brought me some chocolate covered bacon for the holidays a couple of years ago, of course, or I would be eating it right now, which I thought was delicious. It's basically delicious. And so I'm going to say it's chocolate covered bacon because I can do that. Because the whole point of this is that you win big, you profit in some way, not just bacon. You're putting bacon on the table, fine, perfectly fine. Have some bacon, like bacon. But this is that chocolate-covered gift box bacon. This is that gift-wrapped bacon. You see what I'm doing here? So really good, in other words. So high up there, competing with the fish out of water and the cold turkey, I would say. Just desserts. Yeah, I don't like sweets that much. And this one is like, they're really sweet. This is like the sweets are whatever sugar profile you would dislike. You know, in cocktail culture, as well as in pastries and bakery, in my opinion, a really important principle is that most people do like almost all of these things if the sugar content is the amount that they want. In cocktails, often you could also adjust the acid, but you can do it with sugar. You make a daiquiri, sugar, lime juice, and rum, and you balance it by making it 2 to 1 to 1, 2 parts rum, 1 part sugar, 1 part lime. I like this, but a lot of people will find it too tart or too sweet, and you may need to shove it one way or the other. But in my experience, if you do shove it, you present them with a daiquiri that's more sugar, like twice as much sugar as lime, and more lime, twice as much lime as sugar. Those 3 versions of the cocktail, almost everybody will like one of them, has been my experience. Maybe I wouldn't do twice as much, whatever. We're not talking about cocktail ratios right now. You get it. And the same thing with pastries. Different regions have different amounts of like sugar or whatever in their pastries, and this will make them appealing to different people. I like less sugar than most of the population around where I live, so I usually don't like baked goods around where I live, and therefore I bake a decent amount because I like them with an amount of sugar they're usually not made with where I live. Cool. Sounds good. Except I would say just desserts here being a negative thing means the sweets automatically adjust as they enter my mouth to have the amount of sugar I don't want, so which is a lot in this case. And so that sounds bad. And the thing you get is karmic retribution for your great hubris, which would kill me instantly. So I'm gonna say this is the worst possible one. If you know anything about me, that means I'm just dead if I eat this. I get hit by a lightning bolt and die. Dying on the hill of a concept. Well, shit. Okay, so well, you can't really eat a slice of the hill someone died on. Of course. Well done, PistilWhip. You saved us. You fixed it. A slice of the hill someone died on. I mean, so it's dirt. It's basically dirt. I love the like Southern American, I think is where this is from, like Southern United States. Excuse me, specifically Southern United States dessert that is like dirt pie. It's like cookie crumble, icebox cake, not exactly, and often with like gummy worms in it. It sounds gross, maybe to some people. It's the kind of food that kids like sometimes because it's that thing where something gross is gross in like an innocent way to kids. I was pretty squidgy as a child, so it doesn't really make sense that I would like this, but I do. Very much so. In fact, I like it so much that just having brought that up, I must make this immediately. Like, I really want to eat that. And as an adult, like, I haven't had it in decades. Oh yeah, that's gonna be good. Okay, anyway, I get to say it's that, okay? It's like your pet idea. So it's that thing. But dying on the hill of a concept, rhetorically speaking, this is like one of the worst things. Like, I'm deathly allergic to this. Is very bad. And I have very little value to human society other than my rhetorical rapport, such as it is. I know that's not great. I didn't say I was a solid gold bar to human society. I'm just saying I have some value, and it is significantly involved in having some discipline in my rhetoric. So I'm going to say this is fairly bad if I eat it, but it tastes really good. So maybe I'm taking a bite of that, here and there. The apple of your eye. I have to eat compote made from the apples of someone's eyes. So like a jam or sauce made from the eyes of a person I care about a lot. Glances toward partner. No. Cannibalism blast. But if they get turned into apples and my partner goes blind, still very bad. Just about one of the worst ones possible. Maybe that one where I drop dead is actually not as bad as this. Yeah, it's not good. I don't like apple. I do really like apples and apple desserts, but I don't like them that much. Have your cake and eat it too. It's cake. What kind of cake? This is This is that like multi-layer cake. This is that involved cake. This is that ice cream filled. This is a baked Alaska cake. I can do that. I'm mad with power. That's a baked Alaska, but it's a cake. You know what baked Alaska is? It's the thing that's like ice cream and then cake and then meringue, usually torched meringue. And then often like they'll put alcohol on it and light it on fire. Fancy restaurant dessert thing. You can actually make a really good version in the icebox at home if you just don't make it into a dome. If you instead make it like bars, you basically just make brownies, sort of, and you can look up how to make brownies that will freeze better. We could get into this, but we don't have time at all. And then you top it with ice cream, put it back in the freezer, let that harden, and then top it with meringue that you make. Put it in the freezer, let it harden. Torch it, or even put it under the broiler in the oven. That's from, I think, Adam Ragusa. You literally just put the whole thing under the broiler in the oven. I know that sounds crazy because it's a frozen dessert, but the top insulates it, and I did this. It works. I got my burner really hot, and pretty good. And way not hard, like not much harder than just making brownies. Whereas if you make like the dome baked Alaska, that can be a pain in the ass for like what purpose, So what we're gonna say is it's the dome version of the baked Alaska, but it's like a multi-layer cake. It's like a wedding cake, but it's baked Alaska inside. This is crazy. This is the craziest cake because it's virtually impossible to eat or like keep cold. You need like cryonics running in the middle of the wedding cake to keep the ice cream inside cold for long enough that you can be at the venue. This is that kind of cake. But if you eat it, you gain the ability to make really good compromises where everybody wins. That sounds based. I'm gonna eat the cake. Yeah, good. I want an extra serving of this one. A tier competing for S tier. Sounds very good. That's the way the cookie crumbles. Aw. One time I was thinking about existentialism in my school cafeteria as a college student, and I had a mini cupcake. And I was talking to a friend about something kind of somber. It was fine, but like just not something that happy. And I rustled my mini cupcake, and the sprinkles fell off. And I saw in the sprinkles falling off, this is the most me thing to do ever, the nature of human impermanence and an aesthetic in Japanese, which is called mono no oware, or like an awareness of the passing of things, or entropy. And I just burst into tears. And the person with me was like, it's a cupcake. And indeed, you have a cookie, it crumbles to smithereens, but you can eat the cookie crumbs. That's what this is. And these are like Chips Ahoy stale cookie crumbs. Yeah, you kind of knew it wasn't going to be that good. You went to go get the cookies. They've kind of been in there for a while. You knew it wasn't going to be that good. It's that tier of cookie. But I mean, it crumbled. Is that really that much worse? And that's sort of what this is. And what you get if you eat it is resignedness. So not that good, but that has some value. Like below average tier. How about that? Cream of the crop. The highest ranked in a group in terms of quality. You said whipped cream of the crop. So this is whipped cream in a can, but it's like the good can whipped cream. This is the EC pressure whipper device. Look up what that is. But you make fresh whipped cream, not out of the aerosol can. It's not really that different, but you do that. Bit of sugar, tiny bit of vanilla. You add some mature flavors, a little bit of drambuie, perhaps. Try that in your whipped cream. I actually have no idea if that would be good, but, go for it. Angus thoroughbitters in your whipped cream? Huh? That's actually probably a good idea. I kind of want that now. That, and I get to, I'm absolutely the kind of person who does that, by the way. Right into your mouth, the whipped cream. Don't take that out of context. And the thing you get is the best of the best. So this is basically amazing. Another S tier competing for the top. Wow, it's surprisingly good. And we end it with a cherry on top. Something already great tasting. So one of the other foods gets a cherry on top. I think it, of course, needs to be the whipped cream. After all, in your text, you combined them. For my purposes, I needed to separate them out. You have your cake and eat it too, served the way the cookie crumbles. So in the text directly as written, you could argue there's no cookie, but we had to separate it out with whipped cream and of the crop and a cherry on top. So they're together in a way. Cherry on top, it's nothing by itself. It is it's a magic cherry, which you can put on top of an item in this meal to make it better, but it has to already be good. So basically this is just, I have to pick, right? How elegant to the end. It's almost like I planned these out. But I mean, the time we went slightly over because I only somewhat planned these out. Which is the best one? And then it gets the cherry. A little extra. But the thing is that quitting cold turkey would be so sick. Being able to just do that constantly would be so good. Am I willing to just put a cherry on top of my turkey and cheese sandwich for that ability? And I am. The answer comes. I will be eating a maraschino cherry, but like the cheapo ones is kind of what I imagine, because those are still really good. You get like a Shirley Temple at a restaurant and they have like the neon red cherry, the like bad quality maraschino cherry, but those are still really good in my opinion. That's sort of a guilty pleasure, I guess, because they're not great for you. That is on your sandwich. Cherries in my turkey and cheese sandwich, it's like bad, but then you start thinking about it and it's like maybe cherry and turkey sounds like okay, and then cheese and fruit, I would prefer to eat the sandwich without the cherries in there, but I'll do anything for the ability to just manipulate myself freely on a dime. That's incredible. So I'm picking the cold turkey. That would be the most valuable ability to consume in the form of a somewhat disappointing turkey sandwich in the morning when you've slept in a bit too late, with cocktail cherries on top of it. I think we've done very well. An excellent parlay, obviously. From the moment you knew this parlay was about consuming metaphors, It's clearly going to be very good, of course. And if anything you think is bad about it is immediately my fault, because I am the only possible variable. You've done the thing that we all know is the best parlay. I mean, parlay is basically just people attempting to do something like this and failing. No, unfortunately, that's not true. Parlay is full of lots of different varieties of questions, and this is merely one of the myriad options. But thank you for submitting it. And folks, if you'd like to submit pretty much anything you like down in the description, most of them aren't like this, but I would be happy to have more of these. Let's just say it that way. See you in the next one.